job you did. And I tell you what, I don't know if there, I know Dot did a lot, but I don't know if you may have done as much as she did, and yourself too. But I did want to. This is what this message is about today. It's about good job, good job. Look here at Revelation 4, starting with verse 1. John says, "After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter." Now there's a lot thought into this verse, or preached into this verse a lot of times, and I think this is really just the next phase, or the next step in the revelation of Jesus. And what is happening here is that John, in his vision, is going to be called up to heaven kind of prematurely. It's not time for him to die. It's not time for him to go and live in heaven, to stay in heaven. But he's going to get to go up, and as a matter of fact, chapter 4 gives us a very unique vision of the presence of God, of the throne room of God, of what we think of as heaven. Now, whatever you and I, the Bible doesn't tell us a great deal about heaven. This is probably one of the most graphic and descriptive places in the whole Bible. A lot of times we rely upon our imagination, and we think, and I think there's nothing wrong with that, because I believe that heaven is going to be far greater than anything you and I can imagine. But I think it's also going to have a lot of the things that we have imagined. I believe that when Jesus said he was going to prepare a place for us, I believe that there are going to be many, many things and many circumstances and situations and different kinds of things in heaven that you and I are going to be able to see, and we're going to say, I always knew that this would be in heaven. I always knew we'd have banana pudding in heaven. I just knew it. I'm not hungry, but I'm going to have me some. Or I always knew that things would be this beautiful, or far more beautiful than this. And so I think there's going to be something. I think there are going to be many, many, many things in heaven that you and I never thought of. Things that we've never even seen before. Things that we've never even imagined before. I think that heaven would be filled with those things. But also, I think it'll be many of those things. We're going to see many people we know, many of our loved ones. We're going to meet many great people that we've just heard of and never have met. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful time. But remember that it's in this very book, in the book of the Revelation, that in the latter parts of this story, it says, John says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, because the old heaven and the old earth had passed away. Well, my wife she's just fallen off. All her pounds are just wasting away, and women love to try on clothes that they're too skinny for. They just love to come and show, look here, just look at here. So I have to, about every time we go somewhere, she has to look at all these clothes that she can't wear anymore, and so she's letting me wear them. And here, you can have my fat clothes. You can wear them. But I just keep feeding her, and I'm just biding my time. I just keep poking chocolate pies at her and things like that. So I'm just going to take my time, and pretty soon she'll be big and fat like me again. But as we're doing that, talking about eating in heaven, her doctors also told her, giving her a list of all the things that she can't eat, and it's the only things that she does eat, as a matter of fact. So that's going to be a little tough on her, I think. But as we look at this, I wanted you to see that we change, and things are different, and things are going to be better in heaven. But remember, she's going to throw out all those old clothes. She has old clothes. Can you imagine? You probably have an old pair of shoes. You have an old shirt that you like to wear, or you have I have an old car I like to drive. Well, just imagine when the Bible talks about, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, because can you imagine there being an old heaven? Jesus looked around and said, well, this old heaven's kind of worn out, kind of getting ragged. These streets of gold don't shine like they used to shine, something like that. And you and I say, Lord, surely there's not anything wrong with heaven. And he says, well, let's get a new one anyway. And there's Joanne, she's got a new car, and I really thought that, I think she ought to drive that van a few more 100,000 miles and park that new car in the front yard maybe, and just to, let the new kind of settle in a little bit. But whatever you and I imagine about heaven, just imagine that the Lord's going to wad that one up and throw it away, and he's going to make a brand new one that he hasn't told us one thing about. A new heaven and a new earth that he hasn't told us anything at all about. And so it's just going to be a tremendous surprise. But we think, I've often heard people say, well, when someone has passed away, sometimes we try to think of many different euphemisms for death and dying. one of the greatest sadnesses in our life, and yet it is just as much a part of our life and just as important to our lives, our whole life, as our birth was. I've heard people saying, well, he has gone on to his reward. He has gone on to his reward. And I think that we're going to have, we understand from other stories here and other revelations here in this book that God is going to plan he has already planned a big feast for us. It's called the marriage feast of the Lamb. And that means that all of us who know Christ, all of us who've given our lives to Christ in this life, we're going to be the bride, and we're the special guest of honor at this special feast. And no, we're not going to be hungry. We're not going to need nourishment or vitamins and minerals anymore, but we're going to say, this food always tasted good, and I didn't always eat food just because I was hungry. Sometimes I just wanted to enjoy something nice. Well, I ate Wednesday night until I wasn't hungry anymore, and it tasted so good I just kept on eating. Did you do that? You do that Wednesday night? Just kept on eating? I know some of you did. I kept seeing you go back for more. And then some of you carted a bunch of it home. Well, I got a blessing for you. I began to hear all Wednesday night anyway that we weren't going to be able to eat all that food. So we're going to eat after Christmas practice tonight. So we're going to have, if you've been given a part and you want to be in a part, we're going to practice that at 5 o'clock today. And then as soon as practice is done and everybody's got all their parts nailed down, we're going to eat some more turkey, and we're going to eat some more whatever's left over. And I love leftovers. If you don't like leftovers, just let me know and I'll eat your part. But we're gonna get, it's almost like what the Pentecostals call a second blessing. So we're going to get a second blessing tonight right after Christmas practice, okay? And here's the other blessing I'm not going to preach tonight, okay? All right, I'm glad you didn't say amen there. I was listening very careful. I was watching all of you, see if your mouth even moved. That big feast, God is He's going to stand up and He's going to say, I just wanted to thank everybody. And to many of you, I wanted to say, good job, good job. Turn with me if you would again. I don't often look in other places. I like to camp out in one place. But look with me if you would. Over in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25. You know this story, don't you? It's one of the parables of Jesus. And there's a phrase there. I don't want to look at the whole story. But it tells the story. Jesus says that a man divided his goods up among his stewards. He went away for a time, and he wanted them to take care of his things while he was away. And then he came back, and he wanted to find out. He called them all before him, and he wanted to know, what have you done with all my belongings? What have you done with my goods? What have you done with those things that I gave you responsibility over? And he found out that 2 of them had been very faithful, and 1 of them had been a little lazy, and he had been a little bit too conservative. But look at Matthew chapter 25 at verse 21. Now I want you to see exactly what he says here to the first of the servants. Like I said, we're kind of jumping into the middle of a story here, but I want to assume here that you have heard this story before, or you know a little bit about it. In Matthew 25:21, it says, His Lord said to him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee a ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. And also he had received 2 talents, came to him saying, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. It sounds like Carson's rabbits, doesn't it? He said, now I have a whole handful of talents that you've given me. And that's what the Lord wants us to do. He wants us to reach out to Him with one hand, reach out to somebody else with the other hand. And He wants us to be able, when we give an accounting one day, the Lord is not going to ever ask you how much money did you make when you were down here, but He's going to ask you how many people did you take by the hand and lead to heaven. But look at verse 23. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Now, this is very well done. And that's, we don't say that much. I don't guess we would, regardless of how well educated we are, here in the South, we more often use the word good than we use the word well. When we're supposed to use the word well, you're not supposed to say, he learned me good. You know, that's really about as bad as you can get. He taught me well. And we're not supposed to say good job, probably. We're probably supposed to, it would be more grammatically correct to say well done. But I can never imagine in my own heart or on my own mind receiving a greater reward than having the Lord look at me and say, well done, you did a good job. I appreciate everything that you did for me. And I know that in this life we're not always going to receive immediate payback or immediate rewards for all that we've done for the Lord or all that we're going to do. Look with me again also in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 19. Go back just a little bit further. Matthew 19. Matthew 19 and 27. Peter was, the Apostle Peter was pretty brazen, and he was pretty open-mouthed. He was one of those guys that was always saying whatever's on his heart and mind. Now, if you're one of those people, and you tell people, I just say whatever's on my mind. Well, y'all need to be quiet a little bit. That's really not a virtue to say just whatever's on your mind. You may think that makes you an outspoken or forthright, upstanding person, but a lot of times that just makes you annoying. A lot of times I think since we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, we ought to listen twice as much as we talk. So don't be one of those kind of people. So I believe a lot of times that we can be cruel or harsh or unkind. Sometimes we can say things that have not been well thought out and are foolish things. I would have to tell you that I believe I'm an average person. I'm like most other people in the whole world. And I know me well enough that I should never say the first thing that comes to my mind. I shouldn't just blurt out things just because they enter into my gourd. I think it's very important for us to count to 10 or think things, mull things over a little bit, sort through it. My daddy was the kind of person, and I know how prone I am to be like him. He was the kind of person that just said whatever was on his heart and mind. And so as he got a little bit older, and I could very respectfully, not just as his son, but as his friend, say, Daddy, you should have shut up. You shouldn't have said that. And so many times, my dad spent half of his latter life apologizing for things that he said. And there were many things that he said that he had no idea that he'd been offensive. Well, you and I should be very careful. Simon Peter was one that was often saying things that he should not have said. But look right here in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 19, verse 27. He's having a very frank conversation with Jesus. Then answered Peter and said unto him, Behold, we have forsaken all and followed thee. What shall we have therefore? What's in it for me? What's in it for us? He's really saying what's in it for me, but he's saying it this way, what's in it for us? It always sounds as if you're a little bit less heavy-handed and a little less blunt if you feel like you're representing a group or a committee. We have forsaken all and followed thee. What shall we have therefore? We know what's in it for us. What is our reward? That's pretty crass, isn't it? Now, if you're working for someone, it's not beyond you, or it's not ill-mannered on payday to say it's payday and I want my check. I want what we determined would be my pay for this week. But when you voluntarily give up something, or if you forsake something, or if you're doing something and you're saying this is for service, this is for God, then it seems sometimes to be rather crass. If you thought that your pastor, that the only reason that I served as your pastor was simply because I was doing it for payment, I was simply doing it for money, I think that would lower your estimation of my character. Now, I like money, and I guess a lot of times I love money. And yes, I wish y'all would pay me about $1,000 a day. That'd be great. Think about it. Business meeting comes up very soon, so just think about it. That wouldn't last long, though, would it? But it's soon have to come back and say, we don't have any money. We sure did enjoy having you here, but we're going to miss you too. What if you heard that your Sunday school teacher said, "No, I'm just doing this because it looks good on my resume," or I'm just playing the piano, the organ because I get so much lauds and so many lauds and notes of appreciation and thanks and words of gratitude. We would say, well, or someone came and said, well, I just come to church because I really want people to see me. I want to see I had a new hat, and I really wanted everybody to see my hat today. Or I had a new tie, and I want everybody to see my tie. We begin to think. Now, here's Simon Peter. He says, Lord, we followed you. He says, what's in it for us? What are we going to get back in return? You think Jesus might chide him or might criticize him, or Jesus might rebuke him, but he didn't. This is what he said. In verse 28 he says, Verily I say unto you, that ye which have followed me in the generation when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory, ye shall also sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, I want you to remember that verse right there, because I only read the first verse of Revelation 4. When we read the Revelation chapter 4, when I read the whole chapter in the following verses, guess who's sitting in 12 thrones around the throne of God? Guess who appears? It says, when John says, I saw God's throne in heaven, and he says, and I saw the 12. And so Jesus is already promised. He says, you're going to sit with me in judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And every one of you that have forsaken houses, our brethren, our sisters, our father, our mother, our wife, our children, our lands for my sake, shall receive 100-fold and shall inherit everlasting life. Now, Jesus is saying that, no, Peter, you may not receive your reward in this life. I may not hand it over to you right now, but he says, I want to let you know that God is never going to ask you to do something for him that he is not going to just bountifully repay you for. God is going to show his appreciation for us. I love one of my favorite movies. If anybody were to ask Terry what is my favorite movie in all the world, I hope that she would know to tell you that the movie that Kevin Costner played in called A Field of Dreams. That's my favorite movie. It's one of those things. She might tell you Tremors, but that wouldn't look as good on my tombstone. That's not quite as classy. That's kind of a goofball movie. But if I'm flipping through the channels and I come upon Tremors, I just throw the remote control over my head. I just pretty much I got to stay there and watch it to the end. No matter where it's at in the movie, I'll watch it to the end, and I can say it line for line. But Field of Dreams is more of a work of art, and it's more not got the greatest acting in the world, but it's got a great script and a great story. In that story, a man hears a spooky voice out in his cornfield that says, if you build it, he will come. It's just a little whispery voice. If you build it, he will come. And he thinks he's going crazy. But he feels like what this disembodied voice wants him to do is plow up some of his crop and build a baseball field on his property, out there in his field. And he does. And his wife kind of gives and takes with him a little bit, but she thinks he's lost it too. But what happens is a lot of old baseball players come back from the dead, and their ghosts get out there and they play baseball. One of them is Shoeless Joe Jackson. He was one of the famous Chicago 8 they were all discredited and disfamed back in the 20s. The 1920s, they were accused of having thrown a World Series game because they were paid. It was never proven, however, that Shoeless Joe ever participated in the scam, though some of the others did admit that it to be the case. But it was like a time of redemption for them. They were getting to come back and play baseball again on this field that he had built in his cornfield. And there's a poignant scene there where John Kinsella, who's built this field or put it together, is talking to the ghost of Shoeless Joe Jackson there on this bright lit baseball field out in the middle of the cornfield. And John has all through the movie been jumping through a lot of different hoops and doing a lot of other things. And he's pretty frustrated at this point and at this time. It seems that many other of the characters in the story have gotten what they wanted and what they desired, and that their dreams have come true. But all of a sudden he stops the old ghost and he says, I've done everything you've asked me. I've plowed up my cornfield. I've lost my farm crop. He says, I've built this baseball field just for you. And he says, I've done all of this, and I've traveled all over the country looking for this person and that person for you. And he says, and never, ever, at one point, never at any time have I ever asked you what's in it for me. And the old ghost looked at him and he said, well, John, what are you asking? And he's saying, I'm asking, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? He gets his answer before the end of the story. If you've never seen that, if you don't even care anything at all about baseball, it's a wonderful film. And it's one of those that I recommend that you can go and watch, or take the family, or go rent it and pop popcorn and watch it. A Field of Dreams. If you like baseball, it's just an extra special treat. But you ever get to that place where you say, Lord, it just looks like serving you doesn't pay. It just looks like sometimes that the harder I work, one of my pastor friends has on his desk, he says, the harder I work, the behinder I get. You ever felt like that? Sometimes, you look at, you've been faithful, you've done everything that you feel that God has expected you to do, and you can look around your life and you say, there hasn't been a great deal of return. You might even say, Lord, we worked so hard for our meal Wednesday night, but only a very few people showed up. Well, I didn't know if you felt that way, or if you've been worried. I wonder if Brother John's disappointed. Well, don't worry about me. There were 3 or 4 people here Wednesday night that were answers to my prayer. Just the very fact that they just came here, that they were here. There were people here in our church that far in my knowledge, they'd never been here since I had been here. But I tell you what, there were people that I said, Lord, I sure wish this person or that person would come to our supper tonight. And then there were people that I had never met before. There's a lady and her little boy who've been here for several of our gatherings. Well, her husband came with her for the very first time Wednesday night. So I believe there's probably a great deal more things going on that God is doing. I believe we're going to see fruit from every kind of effort that we do like that. And so that is what I would say to you today in closing this message. This is God is never going to fail to bless what you do for him. Anything. And Jesus said to Peter, it doesn't matter what you've given up or what you've sacrificed or what you've done. He says God is going to repay you. He's going to reward you. It may not be now. It may just be later. But he says don't worry about that. You just do it with everything you've got. During the convention last week, we ate at Lawler's Barbecue there in Athens. And I noticed back there in the back, on top of the grill, there was a sign that said Colossians 3:23. A good Christian evidently owns Lawler's. And Colossians 3:23 says, in all that you do it heartily as unto the Lord. Does that mean slinging barbecue? Yeah. Does that mean the baked beans and slaw? Do that for the Lord? Yeah. Do it as if you were doing it for the Lord. Because everything, you'll find that there are 2 wonderful occasions in the Bible when Jesus said, well, you did that for me. And they said, well, Lord, I don't remember us doing that for you. And he says, no, if you did it for someone else, you did it for me. And there were times when people were being persecuted, and then Jesus came and said, you've been persecuting me. And Saul said, Lord, when have I persecuted you? He said, when you've been persecuting my children, you've been persecuting me. Jesus is everywhere. And no doubt, we fed him Wednesday night. And we're going to feed him again tonight. Because Jesus loves leftovers too. Listen, folks, don't ever lose heart. Don't ever give up. And someone that is saying that to you is not someone who hasn't given up in the past or has not wrestled with discouragement, because I've been dark with discouragement many times in my ministry over the years. Sometimes I've given up and sometimes I've quit. But I've learned that there's no good in it. I've learned that there's no benefit in it. And I know just as soon as you turn your back on your responsibility, or upon your obligations, or upon your duties, or upon your joys, then the blessings cannot come. Cannot come. Last year I watched a movie that I'd never even heard of. One of my other favorite actors is an actor named Will Smith. And he was playing a reluctant superhero named Hancock. And he was very much like Superman, kind of like a black Superman, only the problem was that something had caused him to lose his memory. He was an amnesiac. So here he is with all these superpowers, like Superman. He could fly and bullets won't hurt him. He has heat vision and all that stuff, and yet he doesn't know who he is. And so he really had just kind of become a bum, a homeless person, an alcoholic. He wasn't important. He didn't serve the public. He didn't use his abilities to help other people. He had really become so despondent and had such a terrible pity party and turned so negatively inward that he just really, simply, completely gave up on himself and gave up on others and gave up on life. So more often than not, you would see this great superhero lying on a park bench, completely inebriated. Well, the story really is about his his reformation. And about there's a man who comes in, a young man, an ad agent, and he comes in and he takes on Hancock as a project, and he's going to reform him, and he's going to get him in shape, and he's going to turn him around. He's going to take him as a project, and he's going to get him on the right track. Well, it's hard work. It's hard work. One time there's one scene where he's sitting across the table from Hancock, and he's unshaven, and his hair is mussy, and his clothes are all nasty and everything. He just looks like a tramp. And this fella, his new friend, is saying, he says, all right, now repeat after me. Say, good job. You see, for one thing, was where he needed to start was not just doing a good job, but he needed to tell other people they were doing a good job. See, come on, say it. He never did get him to say it. Never did get him to say it. Come on, good job. Well, later on, toward the end of the story, he comes flying in. He's clean shaven. He's got a haircut. He's got a new superhero outfit on. He's coming into a place where a bank is being robbed, and the policemen have already been shot up and hurt and injured. He's shown up. Everybody has grown to hate him in the city where he's taken residence, but they're a little bit relieved to see him show up, and they're a little bit surprised to see in what state he's in. He's come to save the day. But before he does, he looks over at the commanding officer among the SWAT team, and he looks at him and he puts his thumb up and he says, oh yeah, good job, good job. And everywhere he goes, he's telling everybody good job, and he's telling the officer that's down, you did a good job, did a good job. And then he goes in and he does save the day. He rescues all the hostages in the bank. He catches all the bad guys. The last thing he does, he's sitting right there, and he's just about to take off the disguise again. And he comes to the commanding officer again. He says, I just want to tell you one more time. Just want to say again, good job, good job. The police officer looks at him and he says, no, you good job. You good job. And then everybody around there, thousands and thousands of spectators who came out for the curiosity of seeing the bank robbery and the hostage situation and all the gunfire, break out into spontaneous applause for Hancock. And he flies away, having done a good job and told other people. One of the worst things that we could ever do this week or any other time, I believe one of the greatest things we're going to do at the marriage feast of the Lamb, or when we hear God say to us, like he said to John, come up hither. When it comes our time, I believe one of the greatest things we're going to do up there is spend the first 1,000 years of saying, thank you. Thank you, God. Thank you for allowing me to come here. Thank you for allowing me to be here. But let me tell you something else too. It's going to be a time when maybe you haven't felt it down here, or you haven't heard it, you haven't seen any evidence of it, but the Creator of all the universe is going to embrace you in His arms, hug you up close to His body, and He's going to say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Does that inspire you to do a good job down here? Let's do a good job. Let's do a good job. Let's work hard. Let's give everything we've got. I'd give everything I've got. I'd give everything I can ever do to hear Him say that to me. I'd do anything. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Let's pray together. Father, I want to thank you for your goodness to us. We celebrate not only your goodness this week, but we just celebrate giving thanks. The act of it, the thought of it. Help us to truly be grateful. Yes, Lord, there are many shortfalls and shortcomings. There seem to be so many times when we are not appreciated, or we're not rewarded, or when our efforts do not pay off, or even knowing you seems to be more trouble than it brings blessing. One day, we can believe this, Lord, this can be a part of our hope. One day we will look back upon this life and say, I'm so happy that I gave everything I could, that I did everything that I could, that I did the very best job that I humanly could with God's help, to let every action and thought of my life be thanksgiving to God. Father, if there's anybody here today who doesn't know you, or someone who has a bitter or ungrateful heart, I pray that you touch them, warm their hearts. Fill our spirits, Lord, with enthusiasm to the task, whatever it may be that you've called us to. Help us to be people who do well because of you and for you. We ask it, Lord Jesus, in your name.